All right, what we're going to talk about is duotone images, maybe even tritone, quadtone, monotone. So they're images or even designs right now that only use one color or two colors or three colors, not the full color process, the four color process of CMYK. So right now, what I've done here in InDesign, this is a great way to show it because of its swatch panel, and I like the way that it's laid out here because I could actually see all the different colors and obviously all the names and titles of it, and also I could see if the swatches are process and if they're CMYK or Pantone. I'll be able to see, which we'll look at later. So what I've done here is there's a reason why sometimes we come across and have to make a monotone or duotone image or tritone. So really I'm going to talk about how to make those images in Photoshop, and then the situation that might come up where you need to actually use them, especially in a design where you're going to print something. And sometimes when we use colors like that, like a single color or just a two color process, is to save money. So sometimes a printer says, yeah, if you want to use four colors, we'll get a 4-color job. But if you bring it down to one color, that's great. It's going to be much cheaper if we just use one color. And usually when we're talking about one color or two color, we're talking about Pantone colors. So Pantone colors obviously are pre-mixed colors, solid colors that CMYK doesn't make up those colors. They're already pre-mixed. So that would use that on a printing press. And it's the exact same color from your Pantone books. If you're familiar with Pantone books, you look at your Pantone swatch, pick a swatch that you like, and that's the truest value of that color. And then a printer can make that proper color for you. There's formula guides on how to do it properly, and it's international. So you send your print work anywhere all over the world, that Pantone color will always be matched exact. So I made this little design here, and what I did with this design, I'm going to show you. So let's come across a situation here where you have a design, you laid it out, and now all of a sudden you have a picture, so a full color picture, CMYK. You have some other colors that you've used here as well. I have this color here, so if I click on this, I see that, yep, that's the color there, and there's the value, the CMYK value, and I have another color here, the background color, and I have another color here. So I have 3 colors actually uses plus the full image here. So I'm using a full CMYK colors in this image, in this design. So what would happen if all of a sudden the client or myself or the printer, hey, can we make this a 1-color job? Sure, we could totally make it a 1-color job, but how would we do that? So here's where our situation comes up. So what I'm going to do in Photoshop or in InDesign here, I'm just going to duplicate this, click and drag over the top of plus. I could also go to my drop down menu and duplicate spread. A few different ways to do that. Or I could just click it and hold down Option or Alt on a PC, click and drag, and I could duplicate it that way too. So a few different ways. Either way, now I have a second one. So I have my first one up here, number 1, and I have number 2 here. Great. So I want to convert this to a 1-color. So 1-color monochromatic, monotone image design. That's it. So what I would do is first I would start off, I wouldn't even worry about this image yet. I'm going to take this image later into Photoshop and make it a monotone image. Then later I'm going to show you a duotone as well. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to go to my swatch book. So my Pantone swatch book, I go to my color bridge is what I use, and I go to the solid coded. So I'm going to go to the coded version of it. There's uncoded and coded. I'm going to choose coded, and I've already chosen a color that I already kind of like. And what I like to do is with Pantone colors, you can add white to a color, but you're not really adding white. It's not like you're adding a white ink. You're actually adding tint to it, which I'm going to show you here in a little bit. So what we should do is try to pick a darker Pantone color because it has more values if you add more tint to it. If you use a light color, it's going to be very difficult to get a lot of value out of it because it's already a light color. So I'm going to choose a darker color. So what I chose was, and the best way to get your Pantone color in InDesign, in your swatch panel, is go to your drop-down menu, go to New Color Swatch, and this little window shows up, this panel, and what I can do right away, go to Color Mode and click on Pantone plus Solid Coded, because that's the one I'm going to use. And I'm just going to, I already had one chosen. Like I said, I went to my Pantone already. You can go anywhere. You could look at all of these and pick a Pantone you want from here. But once again, this isn't the truest value of it. This is the way the computer shows it, which is going to be slightly off from the actual book. The Pantone book is the truest value of that color. So I already picked one which was 7476C. Perfect, it's right there. And what I could do, I could add it, and it gets added right away. There it is. And I could just say done. I could also add more if I want to try out different ones. That's totally fine. But we notice here that we see this little icons here, and we show that that's a spot color, meaning it's a pre-mixed color. It's not processed, it's not made up of other colors, it's only pre-mixed one color. So that's a spot color, and this is the Pantone icon that suggests, yes, it's from the Pantone book. And I'm done. That's it. I've added it down here in my swatch panel. Now let me start applying it to my design. So I'm going to double click on the type, and I'm going to click on, there we go. I'm going to double click on this type too. And there we go, because remember, if it's a single color, it's a monotone design, that means no black, no gray. The only colors you're allowed to use in a single color design is the actual one color and white. But remember, white's not the ink, white is just the color of the paper. So that's great. So that one I'm going to keep on going, and I can click on that. Great. I'm going to click on this as well. And oh, wait a second, if those are the same color, well, how can I work with that? Really easy, and this is what I was talking about with tint. So when you tint something, you're adding white. When you shade something, you're adding black. Well, adding black is adding an extra ink, which we don't want to do once again. So I'm going to tint it, which we have that option here in the swatch panel. I'm going to tint it down and see what I get. Maybe I'll go to 50% of that ink. I'm using 50% of that. So 50% of the paper is going to show through, and 50% of the ink will be used. So I'm just going to press enter. Let's see what it looks like. Ooh, 500. That's not what I wanted. Don't press enter. There we go. So okay, that looks pretty good. Like, it's not totally off. I'm looking for contrast here, right? So now that I'm only using one single color, but I could really get a lot out of this, which is great. The last color I have to work with is this background color, which is CMYK here. I'm going to make it the Pantone. Okay, obviously an issue. What I'll do, I'll click on the tint. I could even use a 1% of that ink if I wanted to, but I'll just use 5%, which is really close. Maybe it's a little off, but it's still really good considering I'm just using one color. Okay, now the issue shows up where I have to change this image. This image is still CMYK, so if I made a PDF of just this image here, I'm going to have an issue. The printer's going to say, yeah, that's great, you made all these Pantone, but what about this image here? You made it one color, but the image is still CMYK. So this is where I have to go into Photoshop and make it a monotone image. So I'm going to do that right now. So I already have this image open here. I'm going to be able to get it, and I'm going to open it into Photoshop. So here's the image. I already made it. It's already CMYK. It's a TIFF. It's 300 pixels per inch. It's great resolution, so it's good to go. So I've already done that. So I'm going to bring it back into Photoshop, but this time I'm going to not make it CMYK. I'm going to make sure it's a single color. So here in Photoshop, I've opened up the TIFF. It's ready to go. And now in order to now convert this CMYK image into a monotone image, I have to do something. I'm going to go up to Image and Mode. And we can see we want to make it duotone, okay? Well, first we're going to do, this is the option, but we are going to make it monotone, then we're going to try duotone as well. But in order to make it duotone, we see it's grayed out. Well, that's not great, but that's okay. The way to do it is we have to first convert it to grayscale. So we'll convert it to grayscale. And there it is, grayscale. Now if I go back to Image Mode again, now I have access to duotone, which is great. So I'll click on duotone. Now, I'm actually going to click on monotone. So here I could actually look at my presets, which I'm not going to touch. I'm going to look at the type. So the type first I want is monotone. So what that shows, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 channels or spots that I can actually play around with and add color. But first I'm just going to play around with the monotone version. That's just one color. This image is going to be made up of one color. And the one color I'm going to choose, obviously, is going to be my Pantone color. I have that Pantone color. Now, Photoshop does it a little bit differently. It says type a color name to select it in the color. So there's no actually search bar. You just start typing. So I'm just going to use that exact same Pantone I use in my InDesign file, 7476. Just start typing, and there it is. It shows up right there. Great. So it shows up. I select it. I can just say OK. Good, and it uses that proper title name. Look, and there it is. This image is now no longer CMYK. It's made up of one ink, one pre-mixed Pantone ink 74776C coded. The C stands for coded. Now that's not the end of it. Just because it's there, yeah, it looks good, but it looks a little gray. It's not a lot of contrast. The darks aren't there. The lights aren't there. Now this is kind of a fun little way we could play around with that. So here you had the color that you could choose. But here is the curves panel for that specific ink. So let's click on the curves panel and take a look at that. Now, if you're familiar with the curves panel, that's great. You play around. This one's a little bit different, but it gives you super control, which is really, really good. So right now here you can see your normal curve panel, but you also see all these different percentages of the colors: 0%, 5%, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and then it goes to 95 and 100. So right now at 0%, you have 0% of the ink being used, and 100%, you have 100%. So we're talking about the value. So 0 is the light value and 100 is the dark value. The amount of percentage you put in is the amount of ink you use. So are you using 100% of the ink at the darkest tones? So if I bring this one up, I'm going to click on here and I bring this up all the way, that means I'm using 100% of the ink on the lightest tones. Now obviously I don't want to do that. And right now here I'm using 100% of the ink on the darkest tones, which once again, if I bring it all the way down, I'm using none of that ink. If I bring it up a little bit, I'm using 20% roughly on the darkest tones. So that's kind of how it works. So what I could do, I could actually input information into these fields, or I could just play around with the curve itself. What I'm going to do just to start, I'm just going to start at the 50% mark and just click and drag and see what happens. Now it's not live, so it will change, but only when I release the click. So I'm going to play around there. Oh, a little too dark, so I added 78% roughly at the 50% range. So at the mid range, I added a lot more ink. So I'm going to bring that down a little bit. Okay, maybe there. Still not enough, but that's okay. Let me just play, because what I want to make those darker, and the lights lighter. So I'm going to bring this up now. I'm going to go roughly around the 80% range, I believe here. Yeah, 80%. I'm going to bring it up a little bit, see what that does. Okay, I'm starting to add a little bit more darkness to those dark areas. And I'm going to bring this up a little bit. Now, depending on your image, depending on everything, the color you chose, the image, how everything works, you're obviously going to play around with this and see what works better. You can really get crazy and say, hey, okay, now I'm getting a lot of grays, and you probably don't want that. It's just all about playing around and seeing those subtleties of what works, what doesn't work. Once again, I want those lights in there, which may or may not work out. I don't want it too light. Even right there, I'm kind of actually happy with that, especially considering it's one color. So for now, I'm just going to say, okay, I like it, looks good, and that's it. That's kind of all I did. Again, this is the monotone, one version of it, one color. So okay, I'm going to say, okay, there it is, great. Now that we have our image ready to go, I'm going to save it. But the unfortunate thing is, what I usually save all my files as TIFFs, is that TIFFs does not support monotone images, monotone color, and which is totally fine. So because I'm bringing it into InDesign, what I can do is I'm going to save as, or save copy, which is fine, and I'm just going to save it in my organized file as just a Photoshop document. That's totally fine. But this time I'm going to name it a little bit properly. Short Hills, I'm going to call it mono, because I'm using the monotone image, and I'll save it. Great. So now that's done, I'm going to go back to InDesign, and this time, well, I'm going to click on my frame, or my area shape that has my image. I'm going to click on that little circle there that shows that yes, I'm selecting the image, and I'm going to change it up. I'm going to go File and Place. I'm going to find my new image over here, and my new image is right there. Mono, open, and it just switches it out. Now look at this. This is perfect. This whole design on this page is fully one color. Really, we could say two color with the white of the paper, but we don't. We just say it's a one color, and it happens to be, the whole thing has to be Pantone 7476C. That's the whole thing right there. Great. Now let's go one step further. Let's say we want to make a duotone. Now obviously we could figure out tritone and quadtone the same way, but we're just going to go into duotone. I'm going to duplicate this one. And now let's say I want to add another color. Not a problem, but I'm not actually going to do it here. I'm going to do it in Photoshop because I want to show you something. So back in Photoshop, here I am with my monotone image. I'm going to go to Image, Mode, and back to Duotone again. This time I'm going to click on Type, because I can't actually access these. I can't do anything with these until I actually say the type is now Duotone. Now I have access to this ink. I'm going to click on the ink. So let's add another Pantone color. So let's see what we could do. Color libraries. If you ever get the picker, if you're just on the picker, you can go to color libraries and it will bring you to the Pantone. So once again, I'm just going to scroll through. I found another color that I liked, and let's just go with a warmer color because I already have that greenish bluish that I've chosen before. So let's choose a different one right here, 7579C. So I click on this one. Great, nice and warm. And I'll just say okay. So now what Photoshop has done for me, it's actually mixed both of these colors together. But once again, I have control over how these colors are used together. So I'm going to click on that curves panel again, and I could, once again, I'm going to play around, click in the middle, and see what I could do with this. A little too much maybe, bring it down. Okay, maybe I'm going to go to the 70% mark and play around and see if I could add a little bit more. Try to get some interesting contrast, but obviously the image has to make sense overall. Bring in some of those lighter lights there. Great. Okay, I'm happy with this image. It looks great. I'm good to go again. Once again, I'll press OK. And just to show you really quickly, if I wanted to change the 80% mark, I could just press something in here. I'll just put in 80, and I could play around with 100. So you could see that just actually playing around with some of the numbers in the fields will actually change it up as well. But now it added it for me right there. If I don't want it, if I press 0, if I want to get rid of it, I press 0, it's going to bring it down to 0. So now that we're kind of back to where we want to be here, and like I said, I could always get rid of that if I just delete it and it's gone. I can get rid of this one, just press delete and it's gone. That dot just disappears. But like I said, I'll play around with that and bring it back the 80%. And there we go. So good. I'm happy with this. I'll press OK. So once again, I have my duotone. I have my one Pantone. I have my other Pantone, 7476 and 7579C. Good. Now, once again, I'm not going to do this, but ideally, if I want to add a tritone, I could add a third color. Click on it. Color libraries. Let's go with a different color. Just for now, maybe a yellowish. Let's click on it just to show, and obviously now I have 3 colors making up this image. They're mixing, but I don't want that. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to click on duotone, and now I'm back to the 2 color. So I'm going to say, okay, good. I'm happy with this. Now I have my duotone image, looking great. Very happy with it. Once again, I'm going to save it, and I'm going to go down, and it's in my special organized folder. It makes in my links panel, my links folder. So make sure when you link images into InDesign that they are linked from a certain area, because if you break that link, InDesign is going to say, yeah, it's broken, it's not here, and if you send it to print, it's going to be all pixelated, it's not going to look good. So we definitely don't want that. So this one I'm just going to call Duo. So there I am. Once again, Photoshop only. I'll save it. Great. And now I'm going to go back to InDesign, and I can now, this is my duotone version. I'm going to bring this in. Now watch what happens in the swatch panel when I bring in this duotone image. File in place, Command D. And I'm going to bring my new one, Duo. Awesome. There we go. Now look what happens. Look what happened in the swatch panel. Photoshop, I used 7579C. When I brought it into InDesign, InDesign automatically took that swatch and put it in its swatch panel. It recognized the Pantone that I used from Photoshop. Fantastic. So I know I don't have to try to find the new color, make it. It's already there. So now what I could do, I could start playing around with that new color, and now I could play around and add in these different Pantones if I want. Now, once again, this isn't the greatest, obviously, layout we can work with, but it's not actually that bad, depending on the Pantones you choose and the colors you want to play around with. We could kind of have some fun with that. But once again, now I have a 2-color job here. This is 2 colors only. Obviously, we're using the white for some tint, but that doesn't matter. That's just the white of the paper. That doesn't count as an extra ink. This is a 2-color job. This is a 1-color job. This is a 4-color job, CMYK. So I hope that helps in understanding how to convert images to duotone or monotone, tritone, quad tone if you want to add 4 colors, which more or less would be CMYK. I really don't see where that would come into play, where you need to have 4 specific Pantone colors, but anything's possible. And if you're ever in the situation where you have to convert something that's CMYK into a monotone or duotone to save money on ink, to save money for your print job, whatever the case is, this is how you would go about doing it.